Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. You ready to jump in?
Oh, absolutely. Let's dive in.
Okay, so today we're going to be looking at a really interesting set of reflections from someone who has thought really deeply about how they approach life. And I think there's a lot in here for everyone.
Yeah, definitely. Some really relatable themes I think we'll all connect with.
Yeah, for sure. So jumping right in, I think one of the things that really struck me was this person's story about pursuing their passion and kind of what happened when that passion started to fade.
Right, like that initial spark, that drive to go after something you love.
Exactly.
Huh.
And for this person, it was game development. Like they were so passionate about it, they even moved across the country.
Wow, that's dedication. That's a big leap of faith.
Totally. But then after a while, that passion started to flicker. They tried to rekindle it,
Yeah.
learn new things within the field, but it just wasn't the same anymore.
Oh, that's going to be tough.
Yeah.
You pour your heart into something, and then it's like that fire just dies down.
Yeah. And it makes you question everything, right? Like,
Yeah.
what do you do when what you thought was your calling doesn't feel that way anymore?
Right. Is it a failure? Or is it a sign that it's time to move on to something new?
Yeah, it's a really tough question. And for this person, it seems like they landed on the side of moving on. There was this quote that really stood out to me. They said something like, let your mind flow towards what's next.
I like that. It's almost like surrendering to the natural ebb and flow of our interests, recognizing that change is okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think so many of us can relate to that feeling of being pulled in different directions.
Oh, for sure. Like trying to balance what we're passionate about with what's expected of us or what we think we should be doing.
Exactly. Have you ever felt that kind of push and pull?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I think it's something we all navigate at some point.
Totally. Okay, so moving on. This person also talked a lot about their approach to learning. And they use this really cool analogy of waves crashing against rocks.
Oh, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Okay, so they said that they approach learning kind of broadly at first, like taking in a lot of information, like a wave hitting the shore.
Okay, I can see that, like getting a broad overview of the landscape.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then they go back and revisit the material over time. And they said that's when the deeper understanding starts to emerge.
It's like those waves gradually smoothing and refining the rocks with each crash.
Yes, exactly. It's not about that one big impact. It's about the gradual process of absorbing the information.
It makes me think of that idea of spaced repetition, revisiting information over time to really solidify it in your mind.
Totally. So what about you? What's your approach to learning? Do you like to dive deep right away or take a more gradual approach?
I think I tend to lean towards the gradual approach as well. I find that revisiting concepts helps me make those connections and really internalize the information.
Yeah, me too. It's like building a foundation layer by layer. But I'm curious to hear more about how this person applies this kind of wave-like learning style in practice.
Well, they gave a really interesting example related to their experience with working out, which actually ties into another key theme, intrinsic value. So they were talking about how they would hit these plateaus, where they weren't seeing the progress they wanted.
Ah, I feel that.
Yeah. But they were saying that even when they weren't seeing the results, they still found value in the act of working out itself.
Okay, so it's not just about like hitting a certain weight goal or fitting into a specific size.
Right. It's not about that external validation. It's about the intrinsic value of the activity.
I see. It's like finding enjoyment in the process itself.
Exactly. It's about the journey, not just the destination.
That makes a lot of sense. It's so easy to get caught up in those external markers of success.
Absolutely. We live in a very goal-oriented society, but sometimes we forget to appreciate the present moment.
Yeah, like we're always striving for that next thing. But what about just enjoying where we are right now?
Exactly. And I think this idea of intrinsic motivation is so important. It's what keeps us going even when things get tough.
Yeah, because if you're only motivated by those external rewards, you're going to burn out pretty quickly.
Right. But if you genuinely enjoy what you're doing, you're more likely to stick with it.
Makes sense. So it's like instead of focusing on the number on the scale, it's about enjoying the feeling of getting stronger or the endorphin rush of a good workout.
Yes, exactly. It's about tapping into those internal rewards.
Have you ever experienced that kind of shift in your own life from being externally motivated to finding that intrinsic drive?
Definitely. I think earlier in my career, I was very focused on external validation, getting recognition and accolades.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But as I've gotten older, I've realized that the work I'm most proud of is the work that I truly enjoyed doing, regardless of whether it received any external praise.
Oh, I love that. So it's about aligning your actions with your values and finding that internal satisfaction.
Exactly. Now, speaking of recognizing when it's time to shift gears, this person shared this really interesting approach they called their exhaustive approach to change.
Exhaustive approach. What does that even mean?
Well, they described it as like fully investing in a situation, giving it their all before deciding to move on.
Hmm. Okay. So it's about leaving no stone unturned.
Right. And they gave the example of a fading friendship where they really tried to make things work.
I see.
They knew it might not change the outcome, but they still wanted to explore all the options.
So they needed that sense of completion before they could truly move on.
Exactly. It was
Yeah.
about honoring the experience, acknowledging the emotions involved, and then giving themselves permission to let go.
That's really powerful. It's like they needed that closure to be able to move forward without any lingering doubts.
Right. And while seeking closure might look different for everyone, I think that underlying need to process and understand our experiences is something we can all relate to.
It's like they're not just closing a door, they're making sure they understand why they're closing it.
Right. And that can be so powerful, you know? It's
Yeah,
like giving yourself permission to move on without all that baggage.
totally. So think about a time when you had to make a tough decision, like leaving a job or ending a relationship. Did you feel that need for closure?
Oh, definitely. I think for me, it's less about like a formal closure and more about just processing what happened and understanding my role in it.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's about making peace with the situation.
Exactly. And sometimes that takes time. You know, it's not always an immediate thing.
Right. Sometimes it's a process.
Yeah. And I think it's important to honor that process, whatever it looks like for you.
I agree. So as we kind of wrap up our deep dive into this person's reflections, what stands out to you as the most valuable takeaway?
Hmm. That's a good question. You know, I think for me, it's that reminder to be really intentional about how we're living our lives, you know, to be aware of our motivations and to make choices that align with our values.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like this person is giving us a roadmap for navigating life's ups and downs.
Right. And reminding us that it's okay to change course, you know, to let go of what's no longer serving us and to embrace the unknown.
It's been a really thought-provoking deep dive. Thanks for sharing your insights with us.
My pleasure. I always enjoy these conversations.
So for our listeners out there, I'd like to leave you with one final thought to ponder. Think about a time when you felt stuck, maybe in a job, a relationship, or just a rut. How did you get unstuck? What did you learn about yourself in the process?
Ooh, that's a good one. I hope you'll all take some time to reflect on that.
Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. We'll see you next time for another deep dive into the human experience.